And so here we are at the end of the Anglo Allied 6 p.m. turn. Um, Not much more happened. Let's see, we had morale tests, but we did have a morale failure. That was some of Picton's Hanoverians here had to, these chaps here, they had to test because they were within close range of the enemy's guns, artillery, and they failed their morale test. So they became disordered. And of course, therefore, they have lost their stationary status, which means now that in the following French turn, which is coming up, it means that this brigade here of Prince Jérôme's division is going to have a tasty target in the Hanoverians. Sorry, not quite pointing the camera in the right direction. There we go. The tasty target from them going into the Hanoverians there in disorder. The Hanoverians are disordered. We would have to, the French commander would have to back the artillery out of the way. Otherwise, the brigade would be sitting on top of the artillery, which is obviously not allowed. So tempting target there, possible bit of a breakthrough on the line finally. In other action, nobody else failed their morale test, and there was a little bit of fire. The artillery fire from here and the artillery fire from there achieved no results. There was some fire down here in the Bois de Bossieux. The sharpshooters fired on this brigade of Foy's division, and of course they're in a wood, forest rather, so you have saving throws and so forth. These chaps fired back at the skirmishers. Not surprisingly, they didn't score any hits on the skirmishers, but the sharpshooters did score one hit on this brigade, so that was a little bit of a result there. So Foy is definitely taking hits. And that, therefore, is the end of the Anglo-Allied 6 p.m. turn. And here we are at the end of movement in the French 7 p.m. turn, and things are really starting to heat up. The French finally managed to get stuck in, and we'll see what they can achieve. There were no command problems. Everyone was in command, although this move has taken some very delicate positioning of commanders in order to be able to keep troops in command and to also, of course, anticipate what may be needed if they are forced to retreat or even routed. So if we take our traditional technique and go from left to right, we can see that over here on the French left, the two units of Piret's cavalry have finally managed to charge home on the Dutch lights before them here, and also the horse artillery, which was in this sort of a situation, was able to move down here, and still be clear enough of the light cavalry, the enemy light cavalry. So they've shot down there to do something useful, hopefully, in the next few turns. Remember, after this turn, there are only two more turns in the battle, so it's sort of definitely a case of now or never. Interesting command conundrum there, for example, in that Piret is here, and of course it could be that one or both of these units are forced to retreat or whatever, in which case they'll be pushed back, and they would, if they're going to go back half their normal move distance, they would indeed be back here and they would be out of command. And I had originally thought about having him further back, but the thing is, of course, he needs to take them forward if they can make some sort of impression. If they get pushed back, it's probably too late for them to do anything very useful in the battle. And again, it's all down to the business of the tall standing crops. Just a moment. Okay, so we also had let's see, we had this brigade of Foy's division moved forward and drove off the British and Allied sharpshooters back into the forest. This unit here has actually stayed in place. They can't go stationary because they're in a forest. These two here, these two brigades of Bachelou's division, they're now both stationary, and they're basically holding back because I don't want Bachelou's division to become exhausted by exposing it to something, because there are plenty of other troops that can get involved in order to try to achieve a result. There's no point in sending them forward through the wood up against these troops here, for example. Very unlikely to achieve a result, and very likely to just get exhausted, which would not advance the French cause. As we can see in the center, we've got a serious traffic jam occurring now because we've had another division of Comte d'Erlon has arrived. This is just one second here. I've been another division has arrived, and it is in fact, if I can just get that, it's the division commanded by Général de Brigade Baron Joachim Jérôme Quillot du Passage. You know, I mean, when he's at home. And so that's this division here. And then further up, we've got, so they've just arrived. We've got Donzelot's division, which is here, gone forward here and branched off the road here. Then we've also got this artillery battalion, horse artillery battery, sorry, looks like it's with them, but it's not. It's actually with these chaps here, because we've had the arrival of the remainder of Kellermann's corps. So we have Deballe is here, and he's commanding. In the front we have the Carabineers, and behind them we have the Cuirassiers, trying to squeeze themselves into a position, hopefully to do something next turn. That seems rather unlikely, sorry, because in order to get involved, in order to attack in the battle, they would have to put themselves within 400 yards of the enemy in the next turn, and that looks like it's becoming close to impossible. We also had the remainder of the cavalry division that Kellermann was commanding directly has arrived, which is over here. We have General Héritier, and I'm using the name as spelt in David Chandler's book. And then we have, there we have his. We got a cavalry brigade there. They're dragoons, yes. And as we can see, they're in march column, which is why they've been able to reach this point, and they're being followed in march column by the horse artillery of the same division. So that's what's going on there. Then we have the heavy artillery battalion of d'Erlon has moved forward and has indeed deployed, so unlimbered. And the horse artillery of d'Erlon, so d'Erlon is central here. The horse artillery has popped over here, has come over here, and is deployed as well. In the very center, as we can see, as I mentioned, we've got Donzelot's brigades are getting into position. They've stayed back out of musket range. And then over here with these four brigades, of course, which are still completely untouched, shiny new, of Prince Jérôme's division. This one has stayed out of musket range. These three have indeed finally charged the enemy. We shall see what happens with morale in a moment. And it was decided that the best thing to do was, in fact, to get this brigade was in this sort of an area, and it was thinking about moving the artillery out of the way and having them charge the disordered Hanoverian unit. But all things considered, I didn't like them being there and there being this great big gap here, so they've gone over this way instead, and I'm going to blast at them or rather the French commander, is going to blast at the Hanoverians with the artillery battalion once again, see what we can do there. And let's see, I think, oh, and then, sorry, down on the very end here, we've got the cuirassiers have indeed charged the Brunswick cavalry that put themselves in the way so that the cuirassiers could not charge the Brunswick infantry. So lots of exciting things going on. We'll do morale tests and then we will do combat for the French 7 p.m. turn. Before we actually move on to the conclusion of combat, I've stopped at the end of morale testing because we've had some interesting and significant results. It's all gone the way of the French. We have over here, as we might imagine, the Dutch lights faced by these two units. They failed their morale test. They have become disordered. And then over in this direction, the Brunswick cavalry has also failed its test and become disordered. And then the big event was in the center here, where we had the Hanoverian brigade, which was already disordered from the previous turn when it failed morale because it was within the close range of the enemy's artillery. And it's tested morale again and it's failed again, I'm afraid. So because it was disordered, it routed, and being so close to the baseline, it routed off the table and so is lost. So here we see a somewhat theatrical depiction of the departure of the Hanoverians. This is a serious blow for the Anglo Allies because they're in Picton's division, and I believe it's actually Picton's Corps, come to think of it. Yes, 5th Allied Division, and yes, Picton's the Corps commander. Anyway, it was a big brigade, 6 strength points, and his division exhaustion level is 10, so it's over half of that gone. So he's got 4 more strength points that he can lose before his division becomes exhausted. So that was a very good result for the threat imposed by the presence of enemy artillery. So from here we'll move on to combat. And here we are at the end of combat in the French 7 p.m. turn. And there has been a great deal of activity and indeed unspeakable slaughter. Over on the left, as we might have imagined, the French 2 brigades were successful in their melee against the inferior quality Dutch light brigade, struggling to hold the edge of the Bois de Bossu over here. They were eliminated outright for no loss to the French, and the Lancers decided to go forth and take up the position that was held by the enemy. So that means that, well, obviously the Anglo Allies lost a brigade there. They were army troops, so they weren't part of a division, so they didn't contribute to division exhaustion. Then as we move across, we had, let's see, we had the French Heavy Artillery Battalion, which is stationary. It didn't have the Hanoverians to shoot at here anymore because they, of course, routed due to morale failure. So instead it opened up on Picton's troops here, which included some Highland regiments, and scored 2 hits on them. So a bloody business. But then the dramatic event, the next dramatic event was when this brigade here in contact with another Hanoverian brigade there, and they caused them to, they lost the melee, they were disordered, and they were forced back, they were forced to retreat. But at that point, it meant that sufficient casualties had been caused, 10 no less casualties on Picton's division during a single turn, that it meant that the morale of the division collapsed. So this brigade, Hanoverian brigade, which had retreated to this sort of a position, was disordered. Then at the end of the turn, of course, then became routed, so it's gone. And we've got morale collapse. So we have permanent disorder on General Sir Thomas Picton himself and on these two remaining units here. Then further over, we had one victory for the Anglo Allies, which was to say this Brunswick brigade was able to throw back one of Prince Jerome's brigades here. So that's simple retreat, disordered. Then this brigade here of Prince Jerome was able to defeat the Brunswick Light Brigade, which is these chaps here. So they've retreated in disorder. And then finally, on the extreme right, we had the cuirassiers defeated and indeed eliminated without a scratch to themselves, the Brunswick light cavalry, and they moved into this position. They took up the position of the enemy and have changed facing to be prepared to close on the Anglo-Allied line in the next turn. Now, at this point, of course, it means that the Anglo-Allies have one exhausted division, and we can see that the Brunswick division over here is not in an ideal situation. The remaining units are this unit here and these two units here. So there's a good chance that they could become exhausted in the next turn as well. Péponchet's division, of course, which is sort of hiding a little bit back here, is only 1 point away from exhaustion. But the facts of the matter are at the moment that there is one exhausted Anglo-Allied division and no exhausted French divisions. So in a curious way, you could say that if at this point the French withdrew to safety and the Anglo-Allies didn't follow up, the French would win, because, you know, there would be a score of sort of 1-0, as it were. That hardly seems in the spirit of the battle. So I think I'll just sort of press on and we'll see what happens. So yes, a very bloody business, especially, as I said, especially for poor old Picton, who lost no less than 2 brigades in a single turn, and is now what's the word? Morale collapsed. And well, I mean, here's to it. And here we are at the end of movement in the Allied 7 p.m. turn. And essentially, there has been a bit of a falling back and a consolidation around their line of communication. That is to say, the road to Brussels. And as I say, we're at the end of movement, so we haven't had any morale tests yet or any combat. So let's review the situation as usual, going from left to right. Over here, on the extreme left, of the Bois de Bossu. We have some of the British skirmishers have positioned themselves to be able to take some pot shots at these French cavalry of Piret's division, which is moving its way around here. They may be able to score some significant results. One of those units is sharpshooters, so may be able to cause a significant result there. Other skirmishers have sorted themselves out, moved forward to block these units of Foy's division, which are still, they haven't been really advancing through the wood, but they've posed a threat. So we're keeping an eye on them. Then moving further down into the Bois de Bossu, we have, this is Alton's division. And essentially what's happened here is one of the brigades has moved to its right to form more of a block in case Foy's division decides to press on that way. We've had no movement here. And then there's been a lot of movement in this area where we've had Cook who was more sort of in this direction, has decided to shorten the line, so to speak. So he's down there between the limit of the wood and the limit of the battlefield, down there at the extreme, to just form a solid line to stop the cavalry in case it manages to get through. So we got that there, and then we have Péponchet's division is, generally speaking, again trying to keep itself out of danger because we don't want to lose that final strength point. One interesting development was that these are Brunswick sharpshooters. It was decided that it would be best to get them the heck out of combat because otherwise that would contribute to the possible exhaustion of the Brunswick troops over in this direction. And then we've had Picton's forces have done a falling back, so to speak. The idea that we must never forget, of course, in this scenario, the way it's built is, of course, the tall standing crops, which mean that you have to approach within 400 yards and then stop, and can only charge then on the next turn when you're within 400 yards. So what Picton's forces here, which are permanently disordered, as we can see, they have fallen back so that they are beyond 400 yards of the French. So the French will not be able to charge them next turn. They will have to advance to within 400 and stop. Of course, we've been doing this throughout the battle, but I'm just bringing it up here because it is rather a pivotal point, because the Allies do have the option now of doing a series of staged falling back maneuvers to try and hold things off until nightfall. The same sort of thing has been done over here with the Duke of Brunswick's troops. They've fallen back. They've got some maneuver problems, certainly, because we've got some poorly trained troops and bits and bobs. These men were disordered at the beginning of this turn. So although they're facing this way, which looks a little odd, and they're facing that way, as I said, regardless, they cannot be charged because the enemy is too far away. The idea is the standing crops are in the way, so the enemy can't, at the moment, clearly identify them. So they're in no danger of being charged. What they are in danger of is a very specific individual threat, which is, let's see, we've got this horse battery here in the French turn will be able to advance, and because it's a horse battery, will be able to limber, move and unlimber. And if it is within close range of the enemy, then the enemy will have to take a morale test. So that action in itself, without any shooting, could possibly, of course, result in, for example, one of these two brigades, one of Picton's two brigades here, sorry, I'm moving a camera a little bit faster, routing. So we shall see. And that's about the size of it. And so as we go into the morale tests, the only morale tests that we need are for melee or for someone within close range of the enemy's weapons. And there is in fact none of that. So actually I've just made, no, that's not entirely true. Right, okay, so there is a case here. These are within close range of these chaps here, okay? So we'll test morale for that. There's no melee going on at all. And then we'll have some shooting, which will be very little, which will just be as for the French, anyone who can fire at close range. So it's just this battalion here. We can expect the Anglo Allies to be firing from here. And also, of course, we've got some interesting skirmisher action going on over here. Right. And here we are now at the very end of the Anglo-Allied 7 p.m. turn. Morale tests were passed, and we had, as I say, we had a little bit of shooting combat. Let's see, this French heavy battalion managed to score a hit on one of Picton's brigades. The skirmishers firing at the cavalry over here achieved no results. But the main event was that the plucky Allied skirmishers in here each got one kill, even in the forest, against Foy's brigades, one here and one here. And that caused Foy's division to come to its exhaustion level. So there's Foy now with an exhausted division, which cannot close to combat. So that's a relief for the Anglo Allies. They know that the enemy can move towards them, and they can block them, get in the way, they can shoot their muskets, but they cannot charge them. So it's a bit of a relief there. Well done, skirmishers. And so it's on to the 8 p.m. turn for the French, which means that there are now 2 turns left in the battle, and off we go.